father in my householder life, I was overflooded with hundreds of questions from my second son, who was my constant companion. One day it so happened that a bridegroom's party was passing over our tram car, and the 4-year-old boy, as usual, inquired what the big procession was. He was given all possible answers to his 1,001 questions regarding the marriage party, and finally he asked whether his own father was married. This question gave rise to loud laughter from all the elderly gentlemen present. Although the boy was perplexed as to why we were laughing, anyway, the boy was somehow satisfied by his married father.
Okay. Next one, please.
The lesson from this incident is that since the human being a rational animal, he is born to make inquiries. The greater the numbers of questions, the greater the advancement of the knowledge and science. The whole of material civilization is based on his originally large volume of questions put by young men to their elders when elderly person gives the proper answer to the questions of the youngsters, civilizations make progress one step after another. The most intelligent man, however, inquiries about what happens after death. The less intelligent makes lesser inquiries, but the question of those who are more intelligent go higher and still higher.
Okay, next.
Among the most intelligent of men was Maharaja Parikshit, the great king of entire world, who was accidentally cursed by a Brahman to meet death from the bite of a serpent within 7 days. The Brahmana who cursed him was only a boy, yet he was very powerful, and because he did not know the importance of great king, the boy foolishly cursed him to meet death within 7 days. This was later lamented by the boy's father, whom the king had offended. When the king was informed of the unfortunate curse, he at once left his palatial home and went to the bank of the Ganges, which was near his capital, to prepare for the impending death. Because he was a great king, almost all the great sages and learned scholars assembled at the place where the king was fasting prior to leaving his mortal body. At last, Sukdev Goswami, the youngest contemporary saint, also arrived there, and he was unanimously accepted to preside at the meeting. Although his great father was also present, the king respectfully offered Sukdev Goswami the principal seat of ISKCON, and asked him relevant questions regarding the king's passing from the mortal world, which was to take place on the 7th day. Thenceforward, the great king, as a worthy descendant of the Pandavas, who were all great devotees, placed the following relevant inquiries before the great sage Sukdev. My dear sir, you are the greatest of the great transcendentalists, and therefore I submissively beg to ask you about my duties at this moment. I am just on the verge of my death. Therefore, what should I do at this critical hour? Please tell me, my lord, what should I hear? What should I worship? Or whom should I remember now? A great sage like you does not stay at the home of a householder more than necessary. And therefore it is my good fortune that you have kindly come here at the time of my death. Please therefore give me your direction as the at this critical hour.
Okay.
Should I continue, Praveen?
Anyone has any questions or any comments here? Makes sense. We all know this story of Parikshit Maharaj, right? Mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Okay. Yes, we can continue.
The great sage, having thus been pleasingly requested by the king, answered his questions. Can you do little down?
Okay, sure.
The great sage, having thus been pleasingly requested by the king, answered his questions authoritatively. For the sage was a great transcendental scholar and was also well equipped with godly qualities, since he was the worthy son of Ba- Ba- Badr Narayan. Badrayan.
Badarayan, yeah.
Badrayan, okay. Badrayan or Vyasadev, the original compiler of the Vedic literature.
Yeah.
Sukadev,
So one of the important point here is when we have these intelligent inquiries, like what Parikshit Maharaj has, when he has only 7 days to live, he knows, then we also need to, we cannot get answers to those kind of questions just anywhere, right? Just Google, Dr. Google probably may not be able to help us with these questions. So we need to really find a qualified person who can answer these important questions. So that's why this mention of Srila Vyasadeva is here. And Srila Prabhupada is telling that Sukdev Goswami is the son of Vyasadeva, and that's just being son of Vyasadeva doesn't make him qualified, but we all know from the pastime of Srila Sukdev Goswami that he was, by birth, he was liberated, right? And he was the knower of the whole Bhagavatam, all the Vedic literature. So the point is that to get our questions answered, we have to really go to a qualified person. Okay. Anyone? And next person would like to read.
Sukdev Goswami said, "My dear king, your inquiry is very much relevant, and it is also beneficial for all people of all times. Such inquiries, which are the highest of all, are relevant because they are confirmed by the teachings of the Vedanta Darshana, the conclusion of the Vedic knowledge, and are Advaita Samat. In other words, Atmavit Samat. In other words, liberated souls who have full knowledge of their spiritual identity put forward such relevant inquiries in order to elucidate further information about the transcendence. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural commentary upon the great Vedanta Sarika Sutras, which were complied by Srila Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva. The Vedanta Sutra are the topmost Vedic literature, and they contain the nucleus of basic inquiries about the transcendental subject of spiritual knowledge. Yet, although Srila Vasudeva complied this great treatise, his mind was not satisfied. Then he happened to meet Shri Narada, his spiritual master, who advised him to describe the identity of the personality of Godhead. Upon receiving this advice, Vasudeva meditated on the principle of Bhakti Yoga, which showed him distinctly what is the absolute and what is the relativity or Maya. Having achieved perfect realization of these facts, he complied the great narration of the Srimad Bhagavatam or beautiful Bhagavatam, which begins with actual historical facts concerning the life of Maharaja Parikshit. The Vedanta Sutra begins with the key inquiry about the transcendence, Athato
Brahma Jigyasa.
Brahma Jigyatsa. One should now inquire about Brahman or the transcendence.
Yes, so that is that's where the spiritual life starts, when we start questioning, right? And this kind of Athato Brahma Jigyasa, right? Who am I? Okay. Anyone else would like to read?
As long as a man is in the full vigor of life, forgets the naked truth of death, which he has to meet. Thus a foolish man makes no irrelevant inquiry about the real problems of life. Everyone thinks that he will never die, although he sees evidence of death before his eyes at every second. Here is the distinction between animalism and humanity. An animal like a goat has no sense of impending death. Although its border goat is being slaughtered, the goat, being allured by the green grass offered to it, will stand peacefully waiting to be slaughtered next. On the other hand, if a human sees his fellow man being killed by an enemy, he either fights to save his brother or leaves, if possible, to save his own life. That is the difference between a man and a goat.
Okay. Yeah, we can go to the next paragraph.
An intelligent man knows that death is born along with his own birth. He knows that he is dying at every second and that the final touch will be given as soon as his term of life is finished. He therefore prepares himself for the next life, or the liberation from the disease of repeated birth and death. A foolish man, however, does not know that this human form of life is obtained after a series of births and deaths, imposed in the past by the law of nature. He does not know that a living entity is an eternal being, who has no birth and death. Birth, death, old age, and disease are external impositions on a living entity and are due to his contact with material nature and to his forgetfulness of his eternal, godly nature and qualitative oneness with the absolute whole.
So one question I have here is, why do we get this series of birth and deaths? The first line that Darsh read, human form of life is obtained after a series of births and deaths, right, imposed in the past by the laws of nature. So what is that process, or what is that phenomena that creates this series of births and deaths? Anyone can answer?
Prabhuji, would that be called just the law of karma?
Yes, law of karma. And on what basis this law of karma is dependent on? So law of karma is like, it controls it, right? The law of nature, law of karma. But on why that law of karma acts on us?
Because it's based off our past deeds that we've done.
Say again?
Because it's based off of what deeds that we've done.
What actions we have done, right? So more accurately, our desires, right? We have very free will. God, Krishna has given us free will, and because of that will, we have desires. So out of that desires, we create these actions, and for every action there is a reaction. So law of nature reacts in the form of law of karma. Okay. Next.
Human life provides the opportunity to know this eternal fact or truth. Thus, the very beginning of the Vedanta Sutra advises that because we have this valuable form of human life, it is our duty now to inquire what is Brahman, the absolute truth. A man who is not intelligent enough does not inquire about this transcendental life. Instead, he inquires about many irrelevant matters which do not concern his eternal existence. From the very beginning of his life, he inquires from his mother, father, teachers, professors, books, and so many other sources, but he does not have the right type of information about his real life. Want me to continue?
Yes, Mataji, please. Thank you.
As mentioned before, Parikshit Maharaj was given a warning notice that he would meet death within 7 days, and he at once left his palace to prepare himself for the next stage. The king had at least 7 days at his disposal in which to prepare for death. But as far as we are concerned, although at least we know that our death is sure, we have no information of the date fixed for the occurrence. I do not know whether I'm going to meet death at the next moment. Even such a great man as Mahatma Gandhi could not calculate that he was going to meet with death in the next 5 minutes, nor could his great associates guess his impending death. Nonetheless, all such gentlemen present themselves as great leaders of the people.
Yeah, so this is one of the most important point, that we have no idea when the last moment of this life will come, right? At least Parikshit Maharaj was very fortunate to know that he has 7 days, and he made the best use of it because he was intelligent. But we don't have that luxury to know when the end of life will happen, right? Like Prabhupada is saying, next moment, next day, next week, next month, next year, who knows, right? So it could be anything. So what does it mean to us is, if we don't know if it is what Srila Prabhupada used to say, death is what? It is as sure as death, right? It means we conveniently forget about it and we just waste our life. So the point I'm trying to make is the spiritual life should be very urgent, should be treated very urgent, extremely urgent, supermost priority. Okay, so let's go forward. We have discussed these points many times, so I will not take much time on that. We are all intelligent.
It is the ignorance of death and life that distinguishes an animal from a man. A man, in the real sense of the term, inquires about himself and what he is. Wherefrom has he come into this life, and where is he going after death? Why is he put under the troubles of threefold miseries, although he does not want them? Beginning from one's childhood, one goes on inquiring about so many things in his life, but he never inquires about the real essence of life. This is animalism. There is no difference between a man and an animal as far as the four principles of animal life are concerned. For every living being exists by eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. But only the human life is meant for relevant inquiries about the facts about eternal life and the transcendence. Human life is therefore meant for research into eternal life, and the Vedanta Sutra advises one to conduct this research now or never. If one fails to inquire now into these relevant matters about life, one is sure to go back to the animal kingdom by the laws of nature. Therefore, even if a foolish man appears advanced in material science, that is, in eating, sleeping, fearing, mating, and so on, he cannot get free from the cruel hands of death by the law of nature. The law of nature works under three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Those who live under conditions of goodness are promoted to the higher spiritual status of life, and those who live under conditions of passion remain stationed in the same place in the material world where they are now. But those who live under conditions of ignorance are sure to be degraded to the lower species.
Okay, next, please.
The modern setup of human civilization is because it offers no education about relevant inquiries, principles of life. Like animals, people do not know that they are going to be slaughtered by the law of nature. They are satisfied with a bunch of green grass or so-called jolly life, like the waiting goat in a slaughterhouse. Considering such a condition of human life, we are just trying to make a humble attempt to save the human being by the message of back to Godhead. This method is not fictitious. If there is at all to be an era of reality, this message of back to Godhead is the beginning of the era. According to Sri Sukadev Goswami, the real fact is that Grahamedi, or a person who has tied himself like the goat meant for slaughter in the business of family, society, community, nation, or humanity at large in regard to the problem, the necessities of animal life, namely eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating, and who has no knowledge of transcendence, is no better than an animal. He may have inquired about the physical, political, economic, cultural, educational, and similar other matters of temporary, material concern. But if he has not inquired about the principles of transcendental life, he should be regarded as a blind man, driven ahead of uncontrolled senses and about to fall into a ditch. That is the description of the Grahamedi.
So this is a very important word used in our scriptures, Grahamedi. So who are we when we talk about the 4 Varnashram system? Are we Grahastha? Grahast? Everyone agrees?
Grihast.
Anyone who doesn't agree, we are Grahast? Okay. So everyone agrees we are Grahast. Now the definition of Grahast, as per the ashram, is the whole purpose of Grahast ashram is that both husband, wife, the whole family with kids, they cooperate with each other for only one purpose. What is the purpose? Anyone knows what is that purpose of Grahastha? Spiritual, right? So Grahastha means one, the ashram in which the whole family is cooperating with each other like the 4 wheels of a car towards only one goal, and the whole goal is to achieve the Supreme Lord. So, but here the definition of Grahamedi probably sounds more applicable to most of the Grahasthas who are tied up in the material world, right? So they are both, the point I'm trying to make is Grahamedi and Grahastha, they are 2 opposite words. So we have to see whether we are really Grahastha or are we Grahamedi or in between, or are we moving from Grahamedi to Grahastha? So that's up to us to decide and choose. Okay. Srila Prabhupada used this word Grahamedi many times in his purports. Okay, we can go ahead. Okay, here it comes.
The opposite of the Grihamedi, however, is the Grihastha. The Grihastha ashram, or the shelter of spiritual family life, is as good as the life of a sannyasi, a member of the renounced order. Regardless of whether one is a householder or a renunciant, the important point is that of relevant inquiries. A sannyasi is bogus if not interested in relevant inquiries, and a grihastha or householder is a bona fide if he's inclined to put forth such inquiries. The grihamedi, however, is simply interested in the animal necessities of life. By the laws of nature, the grihamedi's life is full of calamities, whereas the life of the grihastha is full of happiness. But in the modern human civilization, the grihamedis are posing as the grihasthas. We should therefore know who is what. A grihamedi's life is full of vices because he does not know how to live a spiritual family life. He does not know that beyond his control is a power that supervises and controls his activities, and he has no conception of his future life. The grihamedi is blind to his future and has no aptitude for making relevant inquiries. His only qualification is that he is bound by the shackles of attachment to the false things he has contacted in his temporary existence.
Very nice. So, Grihastha and Grihamedi we already discussed. What is the other important point here?
Sannyasi.
Sannyasi. So, who is the real sannyasi? Let's discuss. What is the whole purpose of sannyas or order? Why would one take sannyas? And what does it mean?
To leave everything behind and focus on Lord Krishna and serve him.
Yeah, so second part is more important. Leave everything. Usually, the meaning of sannyasi, as we understood, generally the people of this world understand that sannyasi means leave everything, go to the forest, or just in that bhagwa kapda, right? What you call that? Orange saffron cloth. Take up saffron cloth and just leave everything. But the second part is more important, that if a sannyasi is not interested in Krishna consciousness, is not interested in the affairs of God, then that sannyasi is bogus. On the other hand, if a grahastha, although he is in the family life, so it's all about consciousness, right? So a grahastha, if he is inclined towards Krishna, then he's as good as sannyasi. So based on the appearance, based on the clothes, based on the color of the clothes, based on the beard or big jata, the hairs, or based on these kind of features, we should not discriminate between devotees. That's the whole point. Otherwise, we'll end up making offenses. Okay.
At night, such Brahmanis waste their valuable time by sleeping or by satisfying their different varieties of sexual urges, by visiting cinema, shows, and attending clubs and gambling houses, where women and liquor are indulged in lavishly. And during the day, they waste their valuable life in accumulating money, or if they have sufficient money to spend, by adjusting the comforts of their family members. Their standard of living and their personal needs increase with their increase in monetary income. Thus, there is no limit to their expenses, and they are never satiated. Consequently, there is unlimited competition in the field of economic development, and therefore there is no peace in any society of the human world. Everyone is perplexed by the same questions about earning and spending, but ultimately one must depend on the mercy of Mother Nature. When there is a scarcity in production or there are disturbances caused by providence, the poor plan making politicians blame it on cruel nature, but carefully avoid studying how and by whom the laws of nature are controlled. The Bhagavad Gita, however, explains that the laws of nature are controlled by the absolute personality of Godhead. God alone is the controller of nature and the nature laws. Ambitious materialists Materialists sometimes examine a fragment of the law of nature, but they never care to know the maker of these laws. Most of them do not believe in the existence of an absolute person or God who controls the laws of nature. Rather, they simply concern themselves with the principles by which different elements interact. But they make no reference to the ultimate direction which makes such interactions possible. They have no relevant questions or answers in this regard. The second of the Vedanta Sutras, however, answers the essential questions about Brahman by asserting that the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Transcendence, is He from whom everything is generated. Ultimately, He is the Supreme. Can you call it down? Ultimately, He is the Supreme Person.
Not only is the foolish Grahamedi ignorant of the temporary nature of the particular type of body he has obtained, but he is also blind to the actual nature of what is happening before him in the daily affairs of his life. He may see his father die, his mother die, or a relative or neighbor die, yet he does not make the relevant inquiries about whether or not the other existing members of his family will die. Sometimes he thinks and knows that all members of his family will die today or tomorrow, and that he also will die. He may know that the whole family show, or for that matter, the whole show of the community, society, nation, and all such things is but a temporary bubble in the air, having no permanent value. Yet he is mad after such temporary arrangements and does not concern himself with any relevant inquiries. He has no knowledge as to where he has to go after his death. He works very hard for the temporary arrangements of his family, society, or nation, but he never makes any future arrangement either for himself or for others who will pass away from this present phase of life. In a public vehicle like a railway carriage, we meet and sit down together with some unknown friends and become members of the same vehicle for a short time. But in due course, we separate, never to meet again. Similarly, in a sojourn of life, we get a temporary sitting accommodation in a so-called family, country, or society. But when time is up, we're unwillingly separated from one another, never to meet again. There are so many questions relevant to our temporary arrangements in life and our friends in these temporary arrangements. But a man who is a Grahamedi never inquires about things of a permanent nature. We are all busy making permanent plans in various degrees of leadership without knowing the permanent nature of things as they are. Sripad Sankaracharya, who especially strove to remove this ignorance in society and who advocated the cult of spiritual knowledge in regard to the all-pervading impersonal Brahman, said in despair, "Children are engaged in playing, young boys are engaged in so-called love affairs with young girls, and the old are seriously thoughtful about adjusting a baffled life of struggle. But alas, no one is prepared to inquire relevantly into the science of Brahman, the absolute truth."
Like Prabhupada used to say, we are making permanent plans in this temporary world. That is the foolishness. Okay, next, please. Anyone else who has not read so far, they would like to read? Or anyone can read, probably. Srila Sukdev Goswami, who was asked for direction by Maharaj Parikshit, responded to the king's relevant inquiries by advising him as follows. Tasmad Bharat Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Hari Shrotvayaha Kirtitavasya Cha Smartavyasya Chetabhyam O descendant of Bharat, it is the duty of mortal man to inquire about, hear about, glorify, and meditate upon the personality of Godhead, who is the most attractive person because of his fullness in opulence. He is called Hari because he alone can undo the conditioned existence of a living being. If we at all want to be freed from conditioned existence, we must make relevant inquiries about the absolute truth, so that he may be pleased to bestow upon us perfect freedom in life. So what is the duty of a mortal man? To hear, inquire, glorify, and meditate upon whom? The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not on the light, not on anybody else, not on any person. Upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. That is very important. Okay. So before we move forward, any questions or anyone needs any clarification, anything which has not made sense so far? Please feel free to jump in and ask. Okay, so maybe we can keep on going. We still have 10 more minutes.
Shri Sukadeva Goswami has particularly used 4 words in regard to the absolute personality of Godhead. These words distinguish the absolute person or
Parabrahman
from other persons who are qualitatively one with him. The absolute personality of Godhead is addressed as Sarvatma, or all-pervading, because no one is aloof from him. Although not everyone has this realization, the personality of Godhead by his plenary representation resides in everyone's heart of Paramatma, the super soul, along with each individual soul. Therefore, every individual soul has an intimate relationship with him. Forgetfulness of this eternally existing intimate relationship with him is the cause of conditioned life since time immemorial. But because he is Bhagwan, or the Supreme Personality, he can at once reciprocate the responsive call of a devotee. Moreover, because he is a perfect person, his beauty, opulence, fame, strength, knowledge, and renunciation are all unlimited sources of transcendental bliss for the individual soul. The individual soul becomes attracted by all these different opulences when they are imperfectly represented by other conditioned souls. But the individual soul is not satisfied by such imperfect representations, and therefore he perpetually seeks the perfect one. The personality of Godhead's beauty has no comparison, nor do his knowledge and renunciation. But above all, he is Ishvara, or the supreme controller. We are at present being controlled by the police action of this great king. This police control is imposed upon us because of our disobedience of law. But because the Lord is Hari, he is able to cause the disappearance of our conditioned life by giving us full freedom in spiritual existence. It is therefore the duty of every man to make relevant inquiries about him and thus go back to Godhead. Haribo.
Haribo. So very, very important point in this paragraph is Okay, let me go up. I lost track of that sentence. Okay. He is Bhagwan, or the Supreme Personality. He can at once reciprocate the responsive call of a devotee, right? So the whole meaning that Srila Prabhupada is trying to explain in this paragraph is that if we want to come out of this cycle of material misery, then we have to make a call to the Supreme Lord, right? We have to reach out to him. We have to learn about him, right? So, and how do we do that? What is the simplest process given to us to make a call to Lord? We all do it on a daily basis.
Harinam.
Chanting.
Chanting of what?
Mahamantra.
Yeah, the names of the Lord, right? All the bona fide religions, they do that. Whether it's Christian, Muslim, our Vedic Dharma, that has been prescribed as chanting the names of the Lord. That is the easiest way given in this age of Kali Yuga to connect with Krishna. Okay, so we have completed that section too. What was the name of the section? Anybody remember?
Truth and beauty.
Relevant inquiry.
Relevant inquiries.
Everybody is still awake. That's great news, including me. So we can now go to the next section. We have maybe 5 minutes, so we can read a little more. Okay, the soul's research.
Srila Prabhupada writes a letter to noted cardiologist Dr. Wilfred G. Bigelow. The central question, you say, is where is the soul and where does it come from? That is not difficult to understand. In 1968, speaking before a gathering of students at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Srila Prabhupada points out an important lag in technological research. Although you have so many departments of knowledge, he says, there is no department aiming to find the difference between a living body and a dead body. Although advanced in understanding the mechanical workings of the physical body, modern science gives us but little attention to studying the spiritual spark that animates the body. In the Montreal Gazette article reproduced below, we find world-famous cardiologist Wilfred G. Bigelow urging systematic research to determine what the soul is and where it comes from. Reproduced next is Srila Prabhupada's letter in response to Dr. Bigelow's plea. Srila Prabhupada offers substantial Vedic knowledge on the science of the soul and suggests a practical method for scientifically understanding the spiritual spark.
Yeah, we can go ahead.
Gazette headline: Heart surgeon wants to know what a soul is. Windsor, a world-famous Canadian heart surgeon, says he believes the body has a soul which departs at death, and theologians out to try to find out more about it. Dr. Wilfred G. Bigelow, head of the cardiovascular surgery unit at Toronto General Hospital, said that as a person who believes there is a soul, he thought the time had come to take the misery out of this and find out what it is. Bigelow was a member of a panel which appeared before the Essex County Medical Legal Society to discuss problems associated with attempts to define the exact moment of death. The question has become vital in the age of transplants of hearts and other organs in cases when the donors are inevitably dying. The Canadian Medical Association has produced a widely accepted definition of death as the moment when the patient is in coma, responds to no stimulus of any kind, and brain waves recorded on a machine are flat. The other members of the panel were Mr. Justice Edson L. Haynes of the Ontario Supreme Court, and J. Francis Letty, President of the University of Windsor.
Bigelow, elaborating on points he had raised during the discussion, said in an interview later that his 32 years as a surgeon had left him no doubts that there is a soul. There are certain cases when you happen to be present at the moment when people pass from a living state to death, and some mysterious changes take place. One of the most noticeable is the sudden lack of life or luster to the eyes. They become optic and literally lifeless. It is difficult to document what you observe. In fact, I don't think it can be documented very well. Bigelow, who had become world-renowned for his pioneering work in the deep freeze surgical technique known as hypothermia and for his heart valve surgery, said soul research should be undertaken by theology and allied disciplines within the university. During this discussion, Letty said that if there is a soul, you are not going to see it. You are not going to find it. If there is a principle of vitality or life, what is it? The problem was that the soul doesn't exist anywhere specifically. Geographically, it is everywhere and yet it is nowhere in the body.
Okay, continue please.
It would be nice to start experimenting, but I don't know how you're going to get on any of these things, Letty said. He said the discussion reminded him of the Soviet cosmonaut who returned from space to report there was no God because he didn't see him up there. Maybe so, said Bigelow. But in modern medicine, when something was encountered that could not be explained, the watchword is discover the answer. Take it into the laboratory. Take it somewhere where you can discover the truth. The central question, said Bigelow, was where is the soul and where does it come from?
So we can probably leave it here for today with this question: where is the soul and where does it come from? Okay, so that will create little excitement what Srila Prabhupada has to say from the Vedic evidence that we can read on next Saturday. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So based on what we read today, any questions, any comments, any additions, anything which doesn't make sense or made more sense, what you might have liked, please share so that we can be sure that we understood whatever we read today.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
There was one point that I made earlier on in the reading when we were talking about the orders of life or the different varnashrams. And there was, I think, a line, it was pretty brief, that stated that the orders of life are based on one's consciousness and realization. It's not an apparent social order or duty or appearance. It's more on what's going on in your mind and how your mindset and outlook on life is. I thought that to be interesting.
Yeah. It's very important. It's all about consciousness. Srila Prabhupada has repeated many times that it's all about our consciousness. And the beauty of Krishna consciousness is that we can practice it in any order of life, right? A person can be from a so-called low family, from any order of life, any one of varnashram, any order of life. So yeah, thank you for repeating that. That's pretty important. Anyone else?
I like the point where we know that, but still it's like again a reminder. When we see others leaving their body, we think that he's leaving, I'll be eternal, I will stay here forever. So that is a very important point. We have to every day like work on that. Yeah, we have a limited time, so we have to make best use of it.
Okay, great. Akhilesh Prabhu, you have anything to add or say?
No, I think that was good.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice section of this book.
Yeah. Who else is there? Let me see. Okay. If nothing else, we can go to the next section of the program, and we can go with nursing a prayer, and Akhilesh Prabhu will lead us to the nursing a prayer. Now, Akhilesh Prabhu, you want me to share something like on the screen?
No, I'll just do the nursing prayers this time.
Okay.
I think everyone, if you want to share, you can share.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Everyone mostly knows it. Should I start?
Just give me a few seconds. Let me just pull up the prayer. Yes, Prabhuji, we can start.
Okay. Namaste Narasingaya.
Namaste Narasingaya.
Prahlada Lada Dayani. Hiranyakashipur Bhaksha. Shrilatsankani Khalaye. Ito Narshingo Parato Narshingo.
Ito Narsingo Parato Narsingo.
Yato Yato Yamita To Narshingo.
Yato
Yato Yamito Narsingho.
Bahir Narshingo Hidaye Narshingo.
Bahir
Narsingho Hidaye Narsingho.
Narsinghamadim Sharanam Prapade.
Narsinghamadin Sharanam Prapade.
Tava Kara Kamalavare Adbhutarshena Davita Hiranyakashipu Tano Brena Keshavadita Naradirupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
Abhuta Singha
Keshavadita
जगदीश जया नृसिंहदेव जया प्रहलाद महाराज जया प्रहलाद महाराज जया प्रहलाद महाराज जया प्रहलाद महाराज
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj.
जया प्रभुपदा श्रीला प्रभुपदा जया प्रभुपदा जया प्रभुपदा
जया प्रभुपदा
Prabhupada.
Nitya Gaura Haribo 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 Nitya Gaura Haribo प्रहलाद महाराज की जय भगवान की जय
Hari Bol. Thank you, Darsh, for the darshan. Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Thank you, Darsh, for the darshan of Thakurji. Anyone would like to share darshan if they are still awake?
Prabhuji, my Thakurji slept again.
No problem, no problem. Okay. So thank you again. Thank you very much. Please take care, stay safe, and we'll meet on next Friday. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Prabhu, thank you so much, Prabhuji, for darshan. Wow. कैमरा भी पूरा निकल गया शायद, हाँ चला गया। जय 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 हो राधा रानी की जय, लाडली लाल की जय। हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी।
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी।
दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु जी।
कैसे सब ठीक ठाक?
सब ठीक है प्रभु जी, सब भगवान की कृपा।
ऐसा लग रहा है प्रभु जी एजेस हो गए सबको देखते हुए, बहुत
बड़ी कृपा करते हैं आप। और
इस बहाने प्रभु जी सबकी आवाज सुन लेते हैं।
हाँ जी। तो एक दिन हम सोचते थे कि दर्शन कर लें, तो दर्शन तो आपने करवा दिए।
ठाकुर जी कृपा है प्रभु जी।
किशोरी जी के दर्शन
जी।
तो हम सोच ही रहे थे कि ये बोल रही थी कि प्रभु जी के बोले कि दर्शन कराए, आपने करवा दिए।
तो ठाकुर जी की प्रेरणा है प्रभु जी। तो वही मैंने कहा, भक्तों को सबको लगता ही है, मिस करते ही है। जब हम लोग रोज मिलते हैं तो कई बार फॉर ग्रांटेड ले लेते हैं, जब वो चीज नहीं मिलती है तो उसकी वैल्यू मालूम पड़ती है कई बार। अब वैल्यू मालूम पड़ रही है कि ये घर में कैसे घुसा के रख दिया है भगवान ने भी। बांध के रख दिया।
नहीं, वैसे एक चीज देखने वाली है
जी
कि पता नहीं किसी ने डाला था एक अपना वो